And bring in David Jackson, White House reporter for USA Today, and Shira Toeplitz, politics writer for Roll Call. Thanks to both of you for joining me on this Saturday. Do appreciate your time. David, I'm going to start with you. What's your sense right now? How far apart are the two sides?
I think they're closer than a lot of people think, because as Mike just mentioned, the basic dispute is the size of the tax increase on the wealthy, and both sides have said they're willing to negotiate exactly what that rate may be. As far as the Republicans are concerned, they want more commitment from the White House for spending cuts, particularly on the entitlement programs like Social Security and Medicare. And one thing Mike talked about, how the fact we haven't heard much from either of these guys the last few days, I think that's a relatively good sign. We know the President and John Boehner have talked, but they won't say what they talked about. And there's just been it's like the cone of silence has descended on the White House, at least, and the fact that we're not hearing much about what's being said is probably a good sign.
You mentioned some entitlement reforms, and you mentioned Social Security there. A lot of the Democrats that I've had on this program have said Social Security is not on the table at all. Means testing, Medicare, something entirely different. Are you hearing that Social Security might be something that's also included in a fiscal cliff deal?
Well, I'm hearing the Democrats want to block that. They don't want the Social Security to be part of the deal, but the Republicans are kind of insisting on it, so that puts the White House in kind of a difficult position. But that's one of the many issues that are holding up this deal right now.
Shira, the political leverage in all of this, of course, some polling had indicated that Republicans would bear most of the blame if we go over the so-called cliff. Late last week, CNBC's All-America Economic Survey, though, found that 21% of Americans would blame President Obama and the Democrats. 23% say they would blame the Republicans. 52% would be annoyed with both parties equally. Is it really clear at this point who would be blamed?
Well, I don't think so. Well, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I think members of Congress would really bear the brunt of this, and especially the House, which is obviously controlled by Republicans and Speaker John Boehner. They're going to look like they're blockading any kind of deal because they're essentially the odd man out with a Democratic Senate and a Democratic White House. So I really do think in the end, voters, if the deal does not happen, the House will carry a lot of blame for it.
Two numbers very important here, 35 and 39.6. 35%, of course, where the highest tax rate is right now. 39.6% is where the president would like for it to be, where it would be if we go over the so-called cliff. I want both of you to take a listen to something that Speaker Boehner said Friday in response to a question about raising tax rates. Take a listen.
Can you see some way that you could agree to tax rate increase and protect small businesses at the same time? Maybe going with the 37% or some middle ground on rates?
There are a lot of things that are possible to put the revenue that the president seeks on the table. But none of it's going to be possible. The president insists on his position, insists on my way or the highway.
Now, David, there you have it. Speaker Boehner there saying there are a lot of things possible. Later, though, his office seemed to back off, clarifying that he is against raising tax rates. What do you make of this?
Well, I think he has to show some sign of flexibility, just as the White House has, on the question of just how large this supposed tax increase may be. You know, the Republicans say we can raise the same amount of revenue by closing off tax deductions and tax loopholes, and that's their position. But you have to wonder if they won't give a little bit of ground on the actual tax rates, given the polling numbers you just saw. And another thing to remember here in terms of Speaker Boehner is once he agrees, he has to get the entire House to agree, and that's not going to be easy.
Shira, I want to pick up where David just left off there. He says that it's not going to be easy, but it seems as if Speaker Boehner may have finally figured out how to wrangle this herd of wet cats that he has to deal with on a regular basis. No?
It's still a difficult group to deal with. Let's remember this is a lame duck session. A lot of these members are about to leave, which in some ways makes it easier for him to negotiate with Republicans who just lost re-election in the 8 or so seats. On the other hand, he still has a very diverse caucus in terms of ideology, and it's going to be very difficult. You'll notice in his comments, he didn't say no there to 37%.
Yeah.
He didn't say no. That said, if he agreed to 37% in these basically bilateral talks with the president, who says the caucus is going to approve that? He could end up with a lot of egg on his face if he agrees with the president on this. They go forward with a vote, and then it doesn't pass.
David, the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, now asking government agencies to figure out what they would cut if we do go over this fiscal cliff. Remember, we're talking $1 trillion in cuts over 10 years. That would mean furloughs for some federal workers, slower hiring, outside contracting put on hold. The closer we get to the cliff, the more real it begins to seem. How does that then and change the negotiations?
Well, I think it's all part of the political pressure the White House is trying to apply to the congressional Republicans. We saw the same thing in 2011 when we had the near government shutdown and when we had this dispute over the debt ceiling. As the closer we get to the deadline, the White House starts talking about what kind of specific impact that this would have. And in terms of the fiscal cliff, you talked about higher taxes on everybody. One thing that's definitely going to happen, without an agreement, all the Bush tax rates are going to go away, so everyone's taxes are going to go up. You'll see that emphasized quite a bit over the next couple of weeks. But yes, you'll hear the White House talk an awful lot about what a bad situation there will be after January 1 if this deal's not cut.
David Jackson, USA Today, Shira Toeplitz, Roll Call. Thanks to you both. Do appreciate your time. We appreciate it so much. We're going to talk to you a little bit later here in the hour as well.